Hello, Internet. It's time for Wednesday's cereal. So it's time for another comic loaded, quick go through sort of thing, so let's get to it. Now, first up is Echo 26, Terry Moore's little going right now, and I have to say, I was engaged and thought this thing was dynamic the whole way through, and after I put it down, I realized the entire comic took place either in the car or in a diner, and it was just dialogue, and that was it. And it was one of the most engrossing comics I've read recently. And it was just such a bizarre take to realize, because of action upcoming, them just talking about this was so great. The way it was handled was so well done, and that's all it took. And still definitively needed to be comic book just for the expressions and the way that things were going on in the background that you just couldn't do with another medium. Rebels 23, and this issue is just another example of why this is a series that you should be picking up. This issue is fairly well self-contained. Viral Docs tries to make a political play to try to bring some downfall in public opinion of the Green Lanterns, and it's just amazing. Again, maybe not the most action-packed comic, but I mean, when there is action, it's so pronounced and so different that, I mean, this comic is far and away better than any of the Green Lantern titles going on right now, and definitely one of the best DC titles, no matter where you're coming from. The writing and the art is just so superb. If you're not picking this up, I really don't know what you're bothering with. Generation Lost 15. This one really touches upon the idea that Wonder Woman actually isn't in continuity anymore. I don't know if it's been touched upon in other books, because the only one that I've been reading that would deal with it is Wonder Woman, that isn't really, I guess, in continuity right now. But they actually talk about it in the way that it plays off of Max Lord and how he just came back in from being dead. They have a great play with that in there, and it's just really interesting to see, because also they took the last issue, which I know some people felt was another Captain Atom goes to the future and comes back and pronounces, oh, Max Lord's going to do all this, we need to take him down. And then there's this scene with Booster Gold talking about being a hero and kind of undercuts it, but at the same time makes more of it, and it's just, that's Winnick writing. I don't know of any other writer who would have done that sequence and certainly pulled it off like that. This issue pulled together the 14 prior, really, and just said, this is building, this is going somewhere, and this is taking in far more continuity to build the strength of the plot of this book. And frankly, if mega events were written like this book, they would be all that they'd be hyped up to be. This is something playing off of so much of what happened in Blackest Night, and now what's been happening in Wonder Woman, and also what's been happening in Power Girl and Booster Gold. Honestly, I think this might be tying together more elements in a better way than the Brightest Day book itself, which I think credits something to the fact that you can have a strong continuity book if it's written in such a way that the continuity isn't the first concern, but the story is, and the continuity is using to make that story have more meaning. Then probably the most hyped book that you're not reading right now, bam! Thunder Agents. It's good. It's well crafted. It's well told. This one talks about this boy from a Kenyan village, and talks about the running and then him becoming a speedster, and actually it's really just focused on building this character, and there's only a few pages tying to, I guess, what will be the central plot, and it'll be interesting. I'm assuming they're going to do similar things where these characters build and then they have this little moment, and that's how the first arc will be. I'm assuming, I don't know. But it was very much, while I was reading it, thinking, this is well done. But it just wasn't grabbing me as such, and I kind of realized if this was published by Image or Dark Horse, it would have more weight to me, which I realized I'm looking at the labels too much. I just need to start judging this book by what it is, and so I'm going to at least give it another shot. But something about it is just pulling me away, and I think it's the fact that it's a superhero book that's taking itself very seriously, and anytime there's a new take on people with superpowers and all this, and there's no humor, no levity, it can be a well done story, but I just don't care, because I think, especially if they're trying to have realism tied in with all these superpowers, there isn't a matter of levity to it. It doesn't hold weight, because, I mean, who isn't going to be put in that situation, try to crack some dumb jokes just because they're struggling to comprehend everything? I mean, to me, that's what makes it unrealistic at that point. Then Mystery Society number 5. Not even 6, 5. And we're done with what I'm hoping is the first arc, but I haven't heard any press about something coming around the bend. This book was good. The art, amazing all the way through. But I never feel comfortable saying, buy a comic just for the art, because really, if you're going just for that artist's art, there's better ways to go about it. And the story here, this issue is far and away the worst of the 5 thus far. This conclusion was lackluster on a number of levels. There's a secret about the twins that I don't want to give away, but didn't have the impact that I was hoping it would. We've had all these build-up for these side characters outside of the mystery family, which they named themselves, and we don't get much from that. Most of what the characters were their brief introductions, and that was about it. And we have this whole cast ensemble now, and then it was this story which, if you're going to figure how it's going to end, it pretty much hit those points, didn't have much more to it. And I was just hoping that there would be more. And for now, this is supposedly the end of the limited series, and that is disappointing. So I'm hoping that there's more, because I want to get a little more from this series to kind of pay off everything that is built up prior. Could I say the word more an increased number of times in that last sentence? I don't think so. And there's one comic that I actually really wanted to talk about, and that is Detective 871. It is Snyder's and Jock's take on the Dick Grayson Batman, and him running Gotham now that Bruce is back and gallivanting. And I don't know any more about that, because overall, Batman, I don't care. But I heard so many great things about this book, mostly from the Inveterate Media Junkies, who have a podcast up. They're 4 podcasts in. Go check them out. It's the best comic podcast I've been hearing. I've listened to a few, and those guys got it nailed. With this book, the first thing I have to say is the sequences with Dick, and they're opening a crime lab. I don't feel bad talking about this at all, because it was in a preview, and if you haven't read it, you didn't pick up a DC book for about a month, I think. And there's a lot of interplay between Dick and Gordon, and talking about the fact that Dick once was a policeman, and there's a lot going on for that, because he has respect for that. He's not Bruce, and he doesn't feel he's above the PD, but trying to meet them more equal. However, when we get to the other side of things, we see the Batman part of everything, which to me is a crying shame, because for a long time we had Nightwing, who was a character much like Batman, but not Batman at all in all the respects that really make a character. And it was just so sad to see that that's gone from DC now. I mean, there is a Batman, there's going to be other Batmans now, and the fact that there isn't a Nightwing is so sad, because it was kind of this other side of the coin, like this character who had his own city and was more acrobatic and had a very different fighting style, was using Eskrima sticks pretty much primarily, a lot more lighthearted, got in some ways more gritty, because he'd make mistakes, so sometimes he'd have to be a little more brutal at crucial points, not due to any emotional need, but due to the fact that if he didn't do something drastic now, he didn't know if he could deal with it later, and also the fact that it kind of played like a Daredevil comic in some ways, where you have a bit more of this morality thing, because you don't have the Batman effect where no flaws will be made, and therefore you don't have to worry about accidentally killing someone or making some mistake, which takes all the flavor out of it. But again, to this comic's credit, we're seeing the detective come back, and at one point Batman here is actually referred to as the detective, which is nice. And this is supposed to be a Killer Croc thing, but we don't see Killer Croc, and we don't know if we will, but Batman's following leads, and we don't know where the story's going yet. And that's nice to read in a detective story. It's not just some superhero story, but you have to follow the clues to get to where you're going, which is really nice to see in these. And that's part of the reason I did like Nightwing for a while, was he actually had to do some work to get where he was going, as opposed to Batman sizing up a crime scene and presto changeo, rogues gallery or whatever. He knows all the criminals, so he knows who did it just cuz, which was pretty much every Batman comic for about a decade, and that was not very engaging. So while this is a good comic, and if you're into Batman at all, I definitely recommend this. It just, to me, is lacking, because I'd rather read a character with a little more heart and a little more engagement, and that's just all missing here. And while I'm reading this, I just want to go back and read some old Nightwing comics instead, frankly. Since I own those, the price point's a lot more appealing. So I just think, honestly, this whole new take on Batman just isn't my cup. I mean, I understand that there's a lot of good merits to where Morrison's more or less dragged all the books with him, and I'll be reading Batwoman, so I'm sure I'll be getting bits and cues for whatever the important highlights are, but I'm just really not on board with all these Batman comics for the fact that I don't like Batman. I like his surrounding universe. I love the Birds of Prey. I loved Nightwing. I think there's a lot of great characters there, but Batman himself is always fairly intrinsically boring because there's not much challenge to it. And while they're bringing some of that back, it's just not to the point where I can't buy a Batman comic and think, there's a better comic out there that I could be spending my money on every time. So yeah, that was the comics for this week, but I should be hitting you back soon with another comic review. There's actually a couple things that I want to do a little more in depth on, but hopefully I'll have time to get to those soon. We'll see, I don't know. And if there's anything you want me to take a look at, let me know in the comments below, and I will talk to you soon. Peace, love, and a pint.